Good evening, everybody. Good to see you again. Let's see if everyone can hear me. This is on, so I think we just needed to turn it up a little bit. Wonderful. It's so good to see you again. Well, to pretend to see you, because I actually can't see up here very well. And welcome to those who are on the stream. I've been hearing some feedback that there's people who are watching quite regularly, and so I'm sorry that I can't interact with you the same way I can interact with the crowd here, but I hope that this is a beneficial time for you as well. And to all the folks from the future, I hope the future is positive. Welcome to this series as well. I'm going to jump in pretty quickly here. You know, we've been talking about trauma, depression, anxiety, and healing. I came up with a very creative title, right? And so I want to jump right in. Remember, the first two nights we really wanted to understand what trauma does to the brain, but also not just what we call trauma, but anything that is overwhelming stress. When stress becomes toxic, what happens to us? And then starting last night, we really wanted to jump into some practical tools. And that's what we're going to continue with tonight. I just really want to give you as many practical things that you can do or that you can help other people to do. Because again, not everyone has the time or the money or the desire to get a bunch of training, but we all want to help people, right? We all want to be helpful. So that's what the real goal is here. And so some of these slides, you know, it's going to be a little bit different than the first part where everything sort of flowed. A lot of this is like each slide is just a different tool or a different idea that might be helpful. So what I'm asking for you during this time is just to grab onto the ones that really stand out to you, the things that you think might be useful for your toolkit, that might be particularly good for your setting. And as always, we have a microphone running around somewhere. He's right there right now. I'm going to try and move relatively quickly through the first part of this because I also have sort of an activity that I'd like to introduce you to as well at the end. Don't worry, it's not a crazy activity. You're not going to have to talk to people or anything like that. But it's something that we often find quite helpful. Thank you. Okay, so those of you who are online, questions can be submitted online as well. What do they have to, is there a box or something? Live comments. So you can put a question on your live comment. Thank you for that. So we'd love to hear anything as you're watching this. Maybe something that stands out for you online, we can definitely address those things as well. So just to jump right back into where we were last night, we started talking about the idea of felt safety. This isn't just whether or not you actually are safe. There's something about feeling safe. So there's a lot of times where our brains tell us we're not safe when in reality we are, especially if we've had some bad things happen to us in the past, because something can just sort of remind us of what happened in the past. And all of a sudden, even though you might be in a nice, loving place with nice, loving people, all of a sudden you don't feel safe internally. And so these are some of the basic things that you can do or you can suggest to somebody that might help them. I know it sounds crazy to tell somebody, hey, maybe you just need a nap and a snack, and you might actually feel a little more safe. But that's the reality. Sometimes all we need in that moment is a nap and a snack, right? Or some extra water or walking outside. Again, this is not a cure-all. I'm not telling you that if you get enough sunshine, you're automatically going to cure all of your problems. But these are the things that will help you to be a more resilient person. What about those people who are really going through kind of some heavy anxiety? You might have heard of panic attacks or anxiety attacks, right? These are times where a person gets to a point where they get overwhelmed. Their system just gets overwhelmed. Sometimes it comes on very suddenly. And all of a sudden, internally, they're no longer in the room with you, right? They're actually somewhere completely different. They're in a state of total panic, total fear. And that's because, for whatever reason, something got triggered within their body, and now their capacity to cope has been overwhelmed. They're up here. I keep using the same language, right, that we taught before. In other words, they're moving from a place of emotion now, and they're in fight, flight, freeze, and in some ways it's usually a freeze response, right? So for those folks who are really in the middle of serious anxiety, what we want to do is we want to help bring them back into the room. We want to remind them that they are in a safe place, even if they didn't feel like they were. So one of the things that we use sometimes when people are in the midst of it is we want to help ground them. And what we're saying is we're bringing them back to planet Earth, right? Because right now they're in their heads. We want to bring them back to this room. So we do this thing called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's very simple. It's just using all of your senses to bring someone back. So, for example, if somebody's really just in a state of anxiety where they seem like they're panicking, we might say, hey, can you tell me right now what are 5 things you can see? What are 5 things you can see? And that forces them to look around the room, right? So I can see the bright lights. I can kind of see some people out there. I can see this table. I name the 5 things that I can see. Great, you're verbalizing. You're starting to narrow and shrink the world that a person's in. What about 4 things you can touch? What are 4 things you can touch right now? I can touch my clothes. I can touch this, and this. Great, that's awesome. Can you tell me 3 things that you can hear? So that forces them to slow down. And again, we're reminding them to breathe in the midst of all this, right? But what are 3 things that you can hear? So they've got to listen. They've got to bring themselves back to this place. 2 things you can smell. Sometimes you don't want to smell them, but 2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. Now, you can do these in any order. I don't recommend you say what are 5 things you can taste, especially with a small child, because then they'll just run around licking everything. And then you have a whole different set of problems. We don't need all that. But the whole point of this, again, is to help bring a person back. Because even if they're physically there in those moments of panic, you're no longer in the room. You're somewhere totally distant and in a place where you're not in control of your thoughts anymore. So this is a tool and technique that I think can be very helpful if you have somebody in your life who really struggles with that fear and getting overwhelmed by it. By the way, the old school way was told them to do what? What do we tell someone when they had a panic attack? Breathe into a bag. Well, we found that that's actually really bad. That can really be overwhelming. It can give you a feeling of claustrophobia. You're not having healthy oxygen that you're breathing into. The whole thing really is a bad idea. I don't know who came up with it, but it's not something that we recommend anymore. So don't give people a paper bag and tell them to breathe into it when they're panicking. It's probably going to backfire for most people. The other thing you're going to find, you're going to find with a lot of the things that we talk about is these all sound really good as theories. But when you're in that moment, you don't want to practice these things, right? So when we talk about the breathing, this pizza breathing is a really great tool. But when someone is just angry and upset and frustrated and overwhelmed and they can't get control of their emotions, they're not going to want to breathe. They just don't. And you usually don't want to either if you're the person that's in that place. So it's part of practicing it. We're just going to keep practicing it. We're going to make it a habit so that we can come to it even in the moments when we're freaking out, we're getting overwhelmed. Okay, another one that we talk about sometimes, if you remember yesterday I talked about how the body feels it first. Do you remember me talking about that? Sometimes we can sense our stress and our fear and our trauma or anxiety, whatever, within our body, and we won't even know why we're feeling that way. We can't quite identify it. But like I said yesterday, if you can relax your body, oftentimes you can also work to relax your mind. So we talk about something called wet noodles, which is an interesting analogy, but like imagine a piece of spaghetti that's uncooked. What happens when you apply pressure to a piece of uncooked spaghetti? It snaps, right? It's not flexible enough, that's it. In the same way, if we're not able to be relaxed when there's pressure applied to our lives, what's going to happen to us? We're going to snap. We're going to have a hard time. And so we want to be people who can handle the pressure that comes, sort of like a piece of cooked spaghetti, a wet noodle. And so one of the things we teach is like to learn how to be flexible, but part of that is learning how to relax your body. So here's something that you can do. I mean, you guys can do this right now if you want to. Just try to tense every muscle in your body at the same time. Just try to, and hold it for like 20 seconds if you can. Just try to tense every single muscle in your body. I can't do that and talk, but you guys can do that. And after about 20 seconds, which we're not quite there yet, but we're getting close. If you can get to 30 seconds, it's even better. Just really tense. You're going to feel super strong, right? And then you let it all go. And in fact, you can kind of fall out of your chair if you're not careful. If you do this 3 or 4 times, you are relaxing all of the muscles in your body. You're actually releasing a lot of the stress that's going on, because all of us carry stress somewhere in our body. Some of us carry it up in the shoulders, in the neck. Some people carry it towards the back. Some people carry it sort of in their fists and their forearms. And so you may not even realize it, right? But you'll be clenching when you're super stressed. Some people carry it in their jaw, right? They'd start grinding their teeth. All of that's the same thing. You're carrying your stress because your brain is connected to your body. And so if you can learn how to release the stress in your muscles, sometimes that will help you to release the stress in your mind at the same time. And so this is really good. I've done this especially with my oldest daughter, has a hard time falling asleep sometimes. And I mean, lately she's been staying up. She's 9, and she still stays up almost to midnight if we don't like get her in a routine of going to sleep. She's not doing anything. She's just laying in bed not being able to sleep. But I used to be better at this. I need to do it again. But I used to have her progressively relax. So start up here and clench your face muscles and your neck muscles, let that go. And then do your shoulders and let that go. And like work your way down your body. And by the time you get to the end, you have progressively relaxed your whole body. And I've seen her go from like really fidgety and just like not wanting to sleep at all to just out, right? Because she's relaxed her body, which has helped her relax her mind, which has allowed her to finally get some rest. So if you have trouble sleeping at night, that might be something that you could try. If it doesn't work once, at least try it 2 or 3 times, working your way through the process. And you'll learn how to slowly relax. Now, we talked about, again, there's 3 pillars in the trauma-informed care. That's the basis of what I'm trying to do. One of them is building relationships and connectedness. They've found over and over again there are so many benefits to physical touch, to safe physical touch, right? So back in the day, there was a time when we were so not careful with physical touch that people were taking advantage of it all the time, right? So now in my social work training, we've gone the opposite direction where we say we don't want to do any physical touch, right? Because we don't want to hurt people, we don't want to be misunderstood, we don't want to do anything. And we know for a fact that some people are just not comfortable because of what has happened to them, or because maybe they have tactile issues. They may not be comfortable with physical touch, and that's okay. That's why we always ask permission before we initiate any sort of real physical touch, right? You ask somebody if they want a hug before you hug them. You don't just say, hey, come here, give me a hug, right? And if they say no, thank you, then you're cool, right? That's fine. But what we have found is there are so many benefits to safe physical touch because we're made for connectedness. We're created to be together, right? And so we've overcorrected to the point where we, especially after the pandemic, right, where we couldn't have any physical contact at all or even close contact. So now we have to kind of find this middle ground where there's safe physical touch. Sometimes, shoulders or fist bumps, even that, handshakes, those are cool. But if people are okay with it, giving people hugs. This one lady, Virginia, I can't remember how to say her last name, Satter, I think. We need 4 hugs a day for survival, 8 hugs a day for maintenance, 12 hugs a day for growth. How often do you get 12 hugs a day? Now, if you have a small child, you might get that. But if you don't have a small child, how often are you getting that type of physical touch? And again, if you're not comfortable with hugs, that's okay. That's probably a reason for it. Though over time, as you heal, you may find that there's a way of relearning that not all physical touch is bad, right? That at some point we need to learn that there's good touch and there's bad touch. There's a difference. And we don't want to throw away all connections with people. We just need to have healthy connections with people. So I encourage you to, if you're okay with it, to hug your family members and your friends. Be open to that sort of physical connection as much as you're comfortable with. And if you're a hugger, do not assume other people are huggers, right? Make sure that they are actually comfortable with that. Make sure they really want that. This just goes over a lot of the different things that hugs do. We know it releases oxytocin, which is one of the happiness chemicals in your brain. It helps limit stress and anxiety. It makes us more patient. We have found over and over for small children, it's called co-regulation. And what that simply means is that if a child, and it's not just a child, this happens for adults as well, but in the example of children, if a child is just overwhelmed and can't seem to get control of their emotions, if they allow you, if you can give them a hug, your calmness helps to regulate their system, and it helps to calm them down. So sometimes when you have kids throwing temper tantrums, that's the last thing you want to do, right? They don't deserve a hug. They're being bad, they're being naughty, and so we want to punish the behavior. But oftentimes we've found that if we can give them a hug in that moment, many of them will calm down. Then we can work through the things that they were being naughty about, right? It's not avoiding the consequences. People need consequences. It's a healthy thing. But it's like The difference between just punishing because we're angry at their behavior versus truly trying to help somebody. The same thing happens for adults, though. Adults need that healthy connection as well. And sometimes when we are overwhelmed and we can't manage our own emotions, if we have a safe person in our life that we trust, not just any person off the street, but someone who you truly love and trust, if they offer you a hug and they're calm and they're relaxed, they may not do anything, offer any advice or anything, but their hug will calm you. That connection really makes a difference. So there's something really powerful about physical touch. One other thing that kind of goes along with that same idea, and something I just talked about a moment ago with children, this is from the TBRI model, so trust-based relational intervention. If you're a parent or a grandparent, you want to learn maybe some better skills on how to really help young people, or not just parents, but it was developed for parents. TBRI, there's all kinds of stuff on YouTube. You can learn a lot of it from there. But this is really, really good skills in learning how to help people, especially young people who've been through a lot. And one of the principles that is based off of is the idea of connection before correction. I don't think that's just for kids. I think that's for anybody. The idea that if you're going to have to correct somebody, you should have a connection with them beforehand, right? And we all know this to be true. You have somebody, maybe you go to a church and somebody comes and they try to correct something you were doing or saying and whatever, and you don't know this person at all, and they've never shown any care about you at all. Or at school, someone tries to correct you, and you're like, you don't know me. Like, you have no idea why I'm doing what I'm doing. You get frustrated by that. Well, I do. I don't know about you. Maybe you don't. I get frustrated about that. And so the idea is, like, if we really want to help people, if we need to correct behavior, if we need to help someone change their attitudes or whatever else, we'd better work on a healthy connection with them first. The deeper the connection, the more that you can say and do things with people, and they'll trust you enough because they know they have your best interest in mind. And so I've had to work on this a lot when I've worked with kids, like I said, on probation or whatever else, because they don't have a lot of trust. It's not easy to build trust because they've been hurt a lot. But I was able to, because I worked, as I learned how to build connections with these kids, and I could say things to them, some hard things to them that other people could not. And it wasn't because I was a special person, but it was because I had invested in that connection. And so I really want to encourage you, if there's people in your life that you're really struggling with that maybe you're responsible for as a family member, or if you're like a boss or something like that, really invest in those connections with those people before you work towards the correction. Because the correction does have to happen a lot of times, but we have to have the connection first. Another thing, I'm giving you all these nice little words that are rhymey and fun to remember, but they're just helpful principles. And this one is the idea of what's shareable is bearable. Meaning, if you can't talk about it, you probably haven't healed from it. Does that make sense? So that doesn't mean you have to just make yourself talk about it. If it's too painful to talk about, that's something you need to pay attention to and maybe figure out why you can't talk about it yet. But as you are able to share it, all of a sudden you are able to bear it. There's something about a personal connection, being able to share what's going on in your life with someone else. And if you don't, it's kind of like a balloon. So say one day your alarm doesn't work, or you snoozed it too many times, so you wake up late. Think of that as like a little bit of air in your balloon. Now you're freaking out, so you stub your toe on the way out the door. You put a little more air in your balloon. Your car runs out of gas on your way to school or work, so you put a little more air in your balloon. All these things keep going and keep going. I used some of these examples when I was talking about this. But imagine you keep having the air in the balloon, but you're not talking about it. You don't have anyone to share with, or you don't want to talk about it. You're mad about it. And then you just keep going and keep putting air in your balloon. You get home, and someone in your life gets on you about not doing the dishes, so on and so forth. That air keeps going, keeps going. What happens if you don't let some of it out? It's going to pop, right? And that's what happens with us. We have this pressure building up and building up and building up, some of it building up over the course of years because we haven't talked about some issues that we really need to, and we haven't shared it with anybody, and we get to this point where we break, we pop. Or if you don't pop, you just let go of the balloon altogether, and it just blows all over the place, right? And that's what happens in our lives sometimes. We get to these points where the pressure is just too much, we've been holding on for too long, and next thing you know, boom, 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 boom. You're all over the place and wondering why you're overwhelmed and overreacting. So we need to be able to share with people. If you have the same scenario, but you have a friend or a family member and you're like, yeah, man, I woke up late again, I'm super mad at myself because of that. Like, then I ended up not doing well because I was stressed, so my presentation went terrible, right? And so you're processing the day with somebody who is sympathetic to you. That lets air out of the balloon. And if you do that on a consistent basis, all of a sudden, all of those things that were overwhelming to you, you find actually you can manage them. You can handle them. But when you're dealing with it all by yourself, it gets very overwhelming. I'm going to skip that for now. This is a message especially for those of you who are helpers, right? The people who are just really doing a lot for other people. They're givers. They care so much for their friends and for other people in their lives. It is really, really good, the work that you're doing. But we've got to remember, just like this shows up here, you can be an imperfect vessel. You do not have to have it all together in order to help other people. You can have all kinds of cracks, all kinds of breaks. You can be a mess yourself and still help others. However, you can't pour out if you're totally empty, right? So you have to be able to refresh and recharge yourself. And if you're just giving and just giving, there's no receiving at all. You get to a breaking point. You get to a point of crisis in your own life, and it's really difficult for you to be the person that you want to be for other people. So if you're a helper, oftentimes you might struggle with receiving help, with asking for help. But I'm telling you, like all these principles, if you're just writing down, yeah, this is really good for them and really good for them, remember to practice them yourselves, to model the stuff that you want to help other people with. Because there's a lot of people who are very, very helpful, but they get burnt out. And then it's a challenging life for them. I wanted to address this especially since we're in a church. So I know many of us are church people. I don't know if everybody is here. But there's this idea in church sometimes that we put a term to it called toxic positivity. And it's not just in church, but it happens a lot in church. And that's where we feel like we have to always be positive. We have to always be happy, right? Everything's got to be okay. I'm too blessed to be stressed. I'm too blessed to be depressed, right? And so we have all these nice little sounding things. And what we're saying is it's not okay for me to be sad. It's not okay for me to be angry. Negative emotions shouldn't exist if I'm a good Christian, if I'm a good follower of Jesus. Now we know, number one, that's not true. What was Jesus' example? When Jesus was mad, what did he do? I mean, he showed his anger, didn't he? Now, he did it in a way that was pretty strong, but he was pretty clear about his anger. When Jesus was sad, what did he do? He wept. He was a real person, right? So our example, those of us who are Christians who are wanting to follow Jesus, our example is a person who truly felt the whole range of emotions and did it in appropriate ways. But some of us have been taught, we've learned somewhere along the way that it's not okay to experience certain emotions. So here's some signs of toxic positivity. This is when you're not able to share your true feelings. You can't really be honest about how you're actually feeling about something. You know, like it actually deeply hurts you, but you're like, yeah, it's okay. Like, I'm all right. I'll be fine. It's no big deal, right? Even though deep down, that cuts you very deep, whatever that situation was. Another thing is if you feel ashamed for having negative emotions. It's like, why am I sad? I love Jesus so much. You know, I pray, I do all these things. Why am I so sad? I shouldn't be sad. And you're ashamed of yourself for that. Another one that's very common is comparing your situation with someone else who has it worse. I don't deserve to be sad about this, or I don't deserve to be angry, because I know so-and-so, and they've been through so much more that I can't even comprehend. So me being sad isn't fair to them. And that's not true. Like, all of our emotions are valid emotions. It's okay to feel the emotions that we feel. It's important to be honest about how we feel, because that mask actually hides a lot of toxicity within ourselves. And constantly hiding, this is kind of what we talked about, constantly hiding how you genuinely feel. So sometimes we just feel like it's not okay for us to say, hey, when you said those things, that really hurt me, right? That was something, or when you said you were going to be here and then you didn't show up again, that really impacted me. I felt like you didn't value me when you said those things, right? Those are difficult conversations. We much rather avoid them most of the time. But the problem with toxic positivity is, number one, it creates this environment where everyone feels like everyone else is okay. And so then we wonder why we're struggling when everyone else seems to be fine. And number two, the real struggle with this is that it doesn't work in the long run. We become bitter people. We become fake in some ways sometimes. We put on this one show here and a totally different person somewhere else. And that really impacts our well-being and our family and our friends because they can tell that we're not being genuine people. So I would suggest instead of being toxically positive, try faith-based optimism. This is the idea that, okay, this hurts, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm whatever. That's okay, but I know that God has a plan, right? I'm not going to just give in to bitterness and unforgiveness and frustration and just be this angry person all the time. But I'm going to feel my anger. I'm mad about this, but I know that God's going to work it out, right? So you're able to maintain that faith. And I think this is what Jesus did all the time, right? He's withdrawing all the time, talking to his Father. In the same way, we need those times to process our emotions, but we also need to be real about what emotions we're feeling. And when we avoid them, they tend to come out somewhere else. I think I only have a few more before we're going to get to our activity here. To name it is to tame it. Again, this is another nice little line, but the whole idea is oftentimes we feel overwhelmed because we can't quite name what the issue is. So it feels like this giant mountain in front of us, especially if it feels like we're the only ones dealing with it. And that's why there's so much power sometimes even in receiving a diagnosis. Now, there's positives and negatives to being diagnosed, right? Because then we can just feel like this is all we are, right? My diagnosis is all I am. It becomes my identity. But there's a positivity to knowing what is actually going on because it helps you to know other people have been through this and other people have gotten through what I'm going through. And that shrinks it down to size. So sometimes if you're really struggling, you're really angry or anxious or stressed or sad or whatever, one of the best things you can do is slow down and literally try to just put into words exactly what is bothering you. I am angry because, and naming it. I am anxious because, and naming it, right? By naming it, you're able to shrink it down to size and you can have some idea of maybe the direction you need to go to help with that problem. But oftentimes we're so busy avoiding these things that we don't want to sit there and actually face it head on. But we find most of the time if we do turn and face it head on, it's more manageable than we realize. It still might be crushing, but we can get through it. If we can name it, we can tame it, we can get through it. Okay, let's see, where are we? Okay. One thing, I don't know if you can read this, sorry, the lighting might not be so great for you on this one. This is how to tell if your cortisol is flooding. So we talked about the cortisol being the stress hormone and how if it pools on your brain, it's not healthy for us. Like a little bit's good in a crisis, but if it keeps going, it becomes an issue. So these are some things you might want to look out for. If you tend to be, or if you see someone who tends to really overreact, they're getting very overwhelmed by something that seems like it'd be rather small. So one example of this is road rage, right? And sometimes you'll have otherwise very loving people. And then the second someone might be a little too slow or they're in the wrong lane, man, you see a monster come out, right? So if you're overreacting on a regular basis to something, then there might be a sign that the stress hormone's just really high. If you have what's called like a hair trigger, or if you want to cry at like any moment, just tears start coming. Again, it's nothing necessarily wrong with you. It's something to pay attention to. So if you're overreacting, if you get real emotional and you misdirect those outbursts, so you're actually really mad at your boss and you come home and you want to kick your dog, that's a problem, right? Because the dog didn't do anything wrong. And that happens though. That's a sign that our stress levels are so high and we're not able to manage it right now. The opposite is true too. Maybe you're not a super overreacting type of person. Instead, you withdraw. So people who are checked out and they're using something to numb. This is really common, okay? So binging Netflix, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is that you just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going, you're probably using that to check out because you're avoiding some part of an emotion that you're not real comfortable with. Now, it's okay to, to do these things within reason, but when it gets to the point where we just keep going far more than we expected to, and like next thing you know, it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're still on whatever it is that we like to use. Video games is another one. Sports is another one. Any of those things. We all have different things we use to check out. In small amounts, that could be a healthy thing. But if it's starting to take over and we're doing more than we anticipated, it might be a sign that your cortisol levels are super high. Your stress levels are so high, and you're really just trying to find some way to manage it. And that's what you've chosen to do. We can do this also with our smartphones. We can do this with food. And then the ones that we pay attention to more oftentimes is like substance use, any type of addictive behavior. You can do this with addictions to relationships. You've always got to be in a relationship, right? You've always got to be talking to somebody at all times. We can do this, even for good things. Some people are addicted to religion, right? So they're always in church at all times. They're studying the Bible at all times, but they're actually doing it in a way to avoid what's going on internally. Now, not everybody does this, right? Some people are just on fire for God. But there are people within our churches sometimes who they can use religious language all the time, but they're using it to avoid what's going on internally. And sometimes the toughest people to love within our church are really hiding from some of the challenges and some of the brokenness in their own lives, and they haven't quite figured out how to face it yet. So we want to have compassion, right, for all of these people, because we're all using something, but it helps us to understand. Something else you want to pay attention to is if you're isolating a lot, if you're just not answering phone calls, not answering texts that you normally do, not wanting to hang out with people like you used to. All those things are signs that maybe you're just a little bit overwhelmed. And even with good things, if you get out of balance in some way and you're not able to write it on your own, it's your stress levels probably are really high. And these are the things that you fall back on. Oh, I did want to point this out. A recent survey revealed 21% of men and 18% of women have only one close friend or none at all. And so you remember how we talked about the 3 pillars of trauma-informed care. One of them is that community. 1 in 5 men has virtually no community to speak of at all. We're in a really lonely environment in our lives. And because of that, we have a hard time being able to manage the stuff that we're dealing with because we have nobody to share it with. We have nobody to talk the stuff out. And so we just kind of keep it all to ourselves. We can be in a crowd. We can even be in this church, but we can feel incredibly lonely. And so finding and building relationships is something that's extremely important and very challenging, especially if we're going through depression and anxiety and those sorts of things, because it just feels overwhelming. Human connection, human interaction can feel overwhelming, but it's so necessary. Okay. Let me jump into this. Do we have the cards? Okay. Before we go, I just wanted to introduce this. It's called a safety plan. And the idea behind a safety plan is this is helping us. Remember how we have, our logical brain, our thinking brain, right? Then we have our emotional brain. When you're in your emotional brain space, you're not thinking logically and oftentimes don't want to think logically. So part of what a safety plan does is identifying what the plan is when we get to this place so we can bring ourselves back down. Because in that moment, you're not going to be able to think through everything that's going on. And so you might move on impulse. You might do things that you end up regretting later. If you have a safety plan, if you have it really visible, it can be really helpful. So we're going to work through one together. I mean, you guys are each going to identify one. I'm going to get you guys index cards. We're going to pass those out. And some pens. If you need a pen, I think they have some. And we will just practice this idea of a safety plan. This is something, again, even if you consider yourself a really healthy person, everyone has stress, and there's moments where we can be healthier, we can do better. So I'd encourage you to use this. Even my professor, who taught me a lot of the things I'm sharing with you, she has her safety plan laminated, and she has it visible with her at all times because she's understood this is a process that is very helpful. And I have done one. I just forget to bring it with me most of the time. So I need to do better as well. I'll wait just a minute. I think we're passing them all out, and then we will get started on it. It's a very simple process. While we're waiting for it, I want you to start with step 1. I want you to think through and identify which emotion for you is the most difficult for you to manage. It's going to be different for different people. So for some of us, it's anger. When we get angry, it's hard for us to handle it. For some of us, it's sadness. For some of us, it's loneliness. For some of us, it's tiredness. Try to think of the thing that is the hardest for you, like when you start feeling like this, that's the one that starts taking over a little bit more than you want to. It starts controlling you a little bit. When you identify that, that's the first thing you're going to do is you're going to write that on the top of your card. Like, so you can do number 1 and then write out which one it is. Okay? So you're going to identify the emotion. And the second thing I want you to do is to start thinking about this now if you don't have your card, is I want you to think of what types of situations are the most likely to trigger these emotions. So Frustration, for example. Maybe you get really frustrated whenever you feel like you're left out. Some people, they're just really sensitive to, my friends are hanging out without me. And that makes me frustrated. That makes me lonely. That makes me sad. So that would be a type of situation that you might have. It could be different things. For some people, if it's anger, again, driving can bring out a lot of anger. Maybe a certain boss or coworker can bring out a lot of anger. But what are the situations where you find yourself possibly in that place where you're going to get to this emotion? Okay? So I'm going to give you a couple minutes just to think that through. Number one, like I said, think of which emotions are the most difficult for you personally to manage. Second of all, what types of situations are the most likely to trigger these? I'm not going to ask you to share this, okay? This is for yourself. You don't have to share it with the people around you either, so you're welcome to put down whatever you want. This is just for your own personal use. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to really work on that, and then we'll jump to the next part. And you don't have to turn this in for credit, so don't worry if it's not perfect. I'm not going to grade you on it. I'll give you about one more minute to really think on it. Don't overthink it. It's okay. You don't have to write out every situation. This is just sort of for your reference. The point of this, again, is so that you can come back to this and say, oh, yeah, I already thought this through. I've already called this, and I'm going to have a plan for what to do when I get to these points. So I'll give you an example if you're trying to think of one. For me, sometimes sadness can be a hard one for me to manage. I can be a melancholy person sometimes. And for me, it's when I feel like people didn't value me, right? So if I feel like I wasn't valued, I'm going to get sad. So I would write down sadness, and I write not feeling valued or feeling left out. Like that would be one that would be really important for me. So I know in those moments when I feel devalued, this is likely to bring me to a place of sadness. Sadness is something that's likely to be challenging for me. So here's what we're going to do now. You're going to try to identify, and since for the sake of time, this is identify 5 things that you can do. We don't need to write down all 5 right now, but the goal is to write down 5 things. Let me read this to you. Identify 5 things that you can do to help keep yourself and those around you physically, emotionally, socially, and morally safe. In other words, how can you ensure your own safety? Yeah, if you want to take a picture of it for future reference, feel free to. 5 things that you can do. Now, don't just name random things. Think of things that have helped you in the past, because different people will be helped by different things. I'm helped by going for a run. When I go for a run, I feel better. Some of you, if you go for a run, you're going to feel a whole lot worse, right? You're going to be miserable because you don't like running. Running's not fun for you. So don't just write down exercise if that's not something that truly does help you. Try to identify 5 things that you know in the past have helped. Now, some of them can and should involve other people or leaving the physical space you're in. So that could be getting a hug, calling a friend, make some tea or whatever, take a walk. So sometimes you are going to need to leave that environment, and it should involve other people. But let's be real. Sometimes you're going to be triggered, and you can't leave the environment you're in, right? Say you're 3 hours into an 8-hour workday. You can't just leave the building. You can't just call your friend. So we've got to identify some things we can do in that moment if we cannot leave the space. At least 2 of those things should be things that you can do on your own and without leaving the physical space. So for some people, deep breathing really does help. For some people, like the muscle relaxation can really help. For some people, it's calming down. This one talks about counting tiles on the floor, something calm and slow and something that you could do pretty much wherever you are. So try to find 2 or 3 things that you can do that could involve other people, could involve leaving the space. And when we talk about, for example, call a friend, it's really helpful to be specific. Which friends? Like, who are the people that you know? When I call these people, I do feel better. When I text with them, I do feel better, whatever it is. And then the more specific you are, the more helpful the safety plan is. And then, like I said, 2 things that you can do, like even if you are right now, that emotion gets triggered, what are the 2 things that you could do in this moment that you know in the past has helped you feel better? And if you don't know what those are, you might want to experiment, try different things. If you're like, you know what, when I get angry, nothing has helped, then we might want to identify what that is. And finally, you want to keep that on your card. And if you don't like the design of your current index card, maybe the next time, yeah, you can get another card. And like I said, I would recommend, if you really like this, if you think this can be valuable, you can get that card laminated and you can keep it with you. Some people keep it in their car and they have it visible to them. Some people keep it in their, in their purse or their wallet or whatever. I mean, these are a little big for a wallet, but you get the idea. Some people keep it in their cell phone case. Yeah, raise your hand if you need another card, if you want another card. Pastor Brian has one, and we'd love to make sure you have that. Now, this is really good, especially if you're really wrestling with things that you know, like sometimes I get so sad, it gets so overwhelming that I'm not sure I'm always a safe person, right? Like I might get a temptation to hurt myself or to do, something else like that or something really destructive. And so having something like this can be really helpful because all right, I'm getting sad. I know I already called that this is the type of thing that's going to trigger me. Let me pull my card out. Because in that moment, you don't want to do anything, right? You don't want to do anything healthy because you're right up here. But if you already have your card that you've already written and you've already identified, oh, these are the things I need to do when I get to this place. When I get super angry, that's right, I got my card. I can remember what to do. And that can be extremely helpful because if you're trying to come up with a plan when you're in the middle of it, you don't want to do it. You don't want to think of a plan. You might not be able to think of a plan. But having it done beforehand, there's just something about your brain working differently when it's already written down because then you can come back to that sheet. I'm going to give you another minute to just kind of look it over and work on it. And we're getting to the end of our time, probably overtime again. I apologize, I'm not as timely here. I just get so excited. Actually, okay, that's a great question. You said, what if one of the things that makes me feel better is breaking something? Find appropriate things to break. It's okay to break some things. You just can't break everything, right? So if when I get super angry, man, I feel so much better after I've broken something. All right, let's identify ahead of time what are some things that I can break in these moments. Because the reality is, you've seen those rooms, right? Have you guys seen the advertisements? There's like smash rooms where you can literally pay and you can just go take a baseball bat to everything in the room. I mean, I think that's super cool. It's overpriced, so I'm not going to do it. But my favorite thing was slamming doors. Yeah, well, depending on the doors, maybe that's okay. And I guess if you're okay with like investing in maybe door jams on a regular basis. Oh, you did. That's good. When I was a kid, my friend and I really liked to chop down trees. And so sometimes that was a good thing, sometimes that was a bad thing. But we were up in Maine, there's trees everywhere. And man, just going at it, taking a whole tree down, it felt so good. It felt so good. I haven't chopped down a tree in a long time now. It's probably a good thing. Does anybody else want to share maybe something that has helped them, something that has worked for them? I think it's always good to have different ideas and suggestions for people. We got a microphone, so we're going to start passing the microphone around so the stream can hear better. This young man was ready first.
So what I do is I watch TV or play games.
Watch TV and play games? Absolutely. And there are times where that's a really good thing. Again, it's all about being in balance. But there's times where, man, the best thing we can do is just slow down, put on a TV show, as long as it's not something that's like going to make us worse. And that could be a healthy thing. Go ahead.
I grab one of my closer friends and go to an empty room to talk.
Love it. Yep. And some people are going to do really well with just hanging out with the person and talking. Some people don't really love to talk in those moments, and either one can be okay as long as they're safe.
So when I'm mad, depends on the place and situation, but since that's what I do, I talk to myself. It might sound like something like a psychotic thing, but to me, like, it helps me to, like, get the feelings out. Or sometimes I just go, like, if I can go and practice basketball and shoot around, I you know, just something, just get sweat out, that type of thing.
Yeah, work on your fadeaway. No, absolutely. Both of those are good. There's nothing psychotic about talking to yourself. If yourself is talking back in a different voice, we might want to talk about that. But it's perfectly good to have those times where we can have conversation with ourselves.
I used to do push-ups, and that helps release the anger.
Yes.
But now that I'm older, what I used to do is I go to a quiet place, pray.
Go to a quiet place and pray. Yes, thank you so much. I'm glad you brought that up. Both the push-ups, again, we're seeing physical exercise can be really helpful, but prayer, reading the Bible, these are things that are so helpful for us. Now, sometimes we're in a place, maybe in a connection, our own connection with God, where we're just feeling kind of conflicted. And so when someone tells you to just pray about it, that can actually not be a healthy thing. But if you already have your connection with God in place, then prayer is one of the best things we can do, right? Because we know that's our source of strength in those moments.
For me, and might be aging myself, but I'll listen to like 90s music and like just dance.
Yeah.
And just, I don't know, just getting that out depending on the song or whatever, where it's like a silly song that just reminds me of something, but I never was like a sports person, so that's kind of my way of getting my exercise, and that helps.
That's great. I love it. Yeah. Toss on that music that you love. 90s music. Man, 90s made some great music. Made some great music. I'm telling you. Some bad music too, but some great music. Okay, anybody else wanted to share? I think these are all great suggestions. So again, if you're trying to think through some things, anybody else had something they wanted to add to it?
Thank you. I like to write my feelings, and I know somebody mentioned something about expressing their anger outwardly. I thought it may be about ripping the piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a good way.
Yep. That's a really good one, especially if, if you're in a place where you can't just break stuff, but you have that destructive mindset. Crumpling and ripping pieces of paper can be very helpful. Also, if you can't break things, because it's not always good to do, punching a pillow can really get some of that out sometimes. Not for everybody, but for some people.
Yeah, kind of related to that. Sometimes I'll write an email or text, and it's lengthy, and I'm kind of getting all of the feeling out, like everything I want to say. And because it's not a paper that I can rip, deleting it afterwards, discarding it, not hitting send. I've done it before, hit send, and created more issues than it was worth. But the reality is sometimes getting that feeling out, just putting it out there,
Yeah.
typing 1,000 miles an hour,
Yep.
and then deleting it or leaving it in a draft box, thinking about it, processing it, and then realizing, you know what, it's not worth the issues it would create, but it was actually good to be able to articulate,
Yes.
and process through it the way that you process through things sometimes when you talk about them with a friend and think out loud.
That's really good. And I would suggest maybe don't put the email address in. That way you don't accidentally send it. But no, that's really great. There is something very positive that can happen sometimes where we can write or we can type out a letter or whatever, especially to someone who's really caused us harm, really hurt us, whatever, and we just, no filter, say exactly what's on our hearts. We get it out there. Then you can debate later on when you come back down here whether or not it's worth sharing. Most of the time we find that maybe that's not the way to share, or maybe we need to edit it before we share. Sometimes like, no, this needs to be said, right? This really actually does need to be said, and that's okay. But getting it out there, writing it down, and all those things can be so healthy. By the way, typing is okay, and if you're just like to type things or use your your thumb's on your smartphone, that's okay. But there is a lot of science that shows that handwriting is very different. It has something to do with our brain's connection. So as we write out those letters, those words, those sentences, we process. Plus, we write slower than we type most of the time. And so it helps us to slow down sometimes and really think about what we want to say. So that's why a lot of times you'll hear like counselors talk about journaling and these different things, because there's a real connection where you process as you write. And nobody needs to necessarily see what you wrote, but processing it helps you to organize it and figure things out. Anybody else wanted to share before we go? I see a hand here.
And to add to that, I find that writing with a pencil is actually better than writing with a pen. Because as you're processing, you're able to rewire your thought process and erase and then, just create something different on top.
Yeah.
Versus with a pen, you're kind of stuck with that
Sure.
thought pattern.
That's really good. I appreciate that. Yeah. We got one more here. I don't know if there's anybody else. Come to this young man here.
I was going to say sometimes just taking a step outside and just looking at nature and taking a deep breath, that kind of helps too.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that out. Like for me, just being outside, unless there's a ton of mosquitoes or it's South Georgia and it's the middle of, the day, those 2 times are not the best. But other times, just being outside, there really is some, there's a book, by the way, I haven't read the whole book, but I've seen some of the principles. It talks about nature deficit disorder. In other words, a lot of things that we're talking about where we're having all these little ADHD or these other issues, part of it is we're just not out in nature enough. And taking a walk, especially through a forest, there's something about our well-being that happens when we spend time outside. Did we have anybody else, or are we good? I see one more here. Do we have the microphone? We're going to bring one more over here.
I just kind of had to tag on to what they said. When I was in therapy, one thing my therapist told me is like to write a letter to someone who's deceased and to get those emotions out, because obviously you can't get them out because they're not here. So being able to write a letter to that person and get all that stuff out really helped.
That's really good. It's really good. Yeah, sometimes, especially if we have a lot of unresolved stuff from somebody who's no longer around, and we can feel like we're never going to be able to resolve it. Writing a letter and being like, getting everything out that went unsaid while they were alive can be really healing for people, for sure. Okay, I know there's probably plenty of other ones. I want to thank you for this. If you hadn't thought of things before, if you're still not sure everything that works, think about these things that people have suggested, and maybe you're a person who really likes to destroy things, and now I'm going to go break stuff. Maybe for other folks, it might be a little more peaceful. I'm going to go sit in a quiet room and talk to a friend, and I think that's really important too. Don't break your friend, okay? Don't get your things crossed. I just really want to break bones. Yeah, we might not want to do that. Did I see something going? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, somebody online mentioned they like to go to their prayer room and sometimes cry or sometimes sleep.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah. We need those quiet places, those times with our Creator. They can make such a big difference. So all of these are just basic principles. I threw a lot at you in the last 2 days, and there's plenty more we could talk about. And again, I'm just trying to give you as many little glimpses into the things that might help people as possible. And I hope that you can find some of these things really valuable and you can take something away from it. I really appreciate these conversations. And before we close, go ahead.
Sorry, just one more that was put online, just because I want to have them be able to share. Somebody
Sure.
put on there that they like to go driving when they're
Yes.
stressed and listen to inspirational music while they drive.
I love that. That's something that I didn't even think about. I might want to put on my safety plan the next time I remake it, because I've lost the last one. But I really do. There's something for me about just getting in the car and going that just really is very peaceful for me a lot of times, so I appreciate that. Tomorrow we're going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to have, I don't think I might put up a couple slides just to make sure I stay focused, but it won't really be slides, but we're just going to have a conversation about how to help people when they're really in these crisis moments. What might be helpful, what might not be helpful, and also recognizing sometimes our own boundaries, right? The reality that we can't fix everybody, we can't fix everything. So what can we do and what can't we do, knowing our limits. So we're going to have just a conversation on that because we're all going to find people who are in crisis sometimes, and we want to be as well equipped as possible for that. And that will be the end of our time together. Thank you so much so far for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you tomorrow night if you're able to. Those of you online as well, thank you for following along. I appreciate that as well. I'm going to have a closing prayer, and then I think we'll be good to go. Dear Father, thank you again for another evening. Thank you that you have given us so many ways to be healthy. We know that at the root of it, all good things come from you. So any of these things that are valuable, that are worthwhile, we know that you created those as ways for us to be able to manage the challenges of living in a broken world. I know it was not your desire or your will to see all of this brokenness, but I thank you that you work through it. I thank you that there's a possibility that even for those of us who have been through some of the worst stuff, you've created us in such a way that we can get to the other side stronger than we were before. I pray that you be with each one of the people here, especially the ones who might be discouraged, might be tired, having a hard time fighting the battles that have come, and maybe aren't as optimistic that things are going to be all right or that they can be okay. I pray that you give them the courage to just put another step in front of the other. And I pray that you remind them that you can be there. You are there with them, even when they don't feel you, when they don't sense you. And Lord, may we be people that are committed to being a safe community, a loving community for the people in our midst who really are going through some rough stuff. Help us to be those friends and those family members that can help to change, save, transform lives. And Lord, may we be as healthy as we possibly can. In Jesus' name, amen.